Welcome to the chat. In this community, you and I are allowed to freely and fully be our authentic self. My name is Selassie, and I'm going to be your host. Today, we'll be chatting with Ramiro. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing his name right, but he's going to correct me. He works in the real estate business, and just like a lot of people, he has a story, and I'm very interested in his story. And if you are as interested as I am, why don't you grab a popcorn, a glass of wine, water, juice, whatever, and enjoy. Enjoy it alone, with a friend, or with a boo. Welcome to the chat with Selassie. This is part 1. And help me welcome my friend Ramiro.
You know, that's terrible the way you say my name.
Is this still terrible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, wait, help me.
So people will not know this, but before we got on camera, you were like throwing my name up.
Okay. And I was trying. I thought I tried.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you're getting better, but you can just call me Ramiro. But if you want to know it, the Spanish, it's Ramiro.
Ramiro.
Sort of, yeah, something like that. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for correcting me, friend. Today, what we'll be talking about...
Multiple times.
We will be talking about his life, growing up as a child, and his adult life. So how are you? How have you been?
I'm good. So I'm really excited for you, right? I know you've been talking about this for quite some time. Why are you laughing? I'm being serious. But I really am excited for you. And I know that your nerves are probably going everywhere right now, but...
A little bit, yeah.
I'm excited for you, for this show, and for your future with this, wherever this takes you.
Thank you. So I do know a little about you. I do not know much about, how you grew up and all that. And I would love for us to start there. So tell us about, growing up. I know you were half Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
And half American?
Mexican, Puerto Rican.
Okay.
But yeah, so I was born in Texas. I come from a very large family. There's 7 of us. Well, there was 7 of us. But we could talk about that later, I guess. But yeah, so very big family. I was raised by my mom. Growing up, I'd say that it wasn't easy. Everybody was doing their own thing. Like by the time I was, I think, in 5th, 6th grade, my older brother and my older sisters had moved out. And then another older brother of mine ended up moving out. Then I moved out. And then my younger brother and my younger sister stayed. But it wasn't easy. Like my mom raised us by herself. She was always working. I felt like we grew up faster than what we were supposed to. Had to stay home while she was out doing, working. Like we had to clean the house. We had to do dinner. And then there was a bunch of dynamics that comes with being a single parent, right? So she would come home, and I found this out years later, that, she would come home, she'd be stressed, right? She was stressed, and then she would take out her stress and frustration with being by herself on us, which led to a lot of abuse at a very young age. So, yeah, it wasn't easy, There's a lot of things then that were very hard and that were taken away from me. So,
what are some of those things that were taken away from you? Can you give us an example?
Yeah. So that's a tough question, right? But it's you, so I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you, right? But yeah, I think for starters, not having my dad there was a pretty big deal for me, right? He left when I was a baby, and from what my mom said, he went to Mexico, supposedly built us a house, and then he ended up finding somebody else, and he married that person and never came back. And then just being, I didn't have a father figure. My mom was never there. And then I grew up hating her and then having a really bad relationship with her, so much so that I left the house when I was 14, 15. But what people don't understand is that I think, like, I get it, divorce, that's everywhere, right? Like, you see it everywhere. But I think it's so vital and it's so important for a father figure to be in a child's life, some way, form, or shape, right? I don't know if I said that right, but some shape, form, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
But it's so important because, if you leave, who does the child have, right? Mm-hmm. But if you leave and you're still there, that's something totally different. Well, mine left and never came back. So the people that I was looking up to were my older brothers, who, oh, by the way, were big time gang members, used drugs, and I was introduced to that at a very young age. We're talking about 10, 11 years old, being introduced to cocaine, right? And drugs.
So did you actually use the cocaine at 10, 11, or were you selling them? Or like at that point, like when you say you were introduced to them, what exactly does that mean?
I mean, I was using it very regularly, but it was because I was wanting to be a father. I wanted to be accepted by my older brothers, right? So, I didn't want to be the one brother that was like, "No, I don't want to do it," which is why I leaned heavily towards the whole gang scene,
So basically you wanted to fit in.
Yeah, I wanted to fit in. But it just goes back to what I was telling you, right? That's why I feel that I missed out on like having a father figure in my life. I think it's so important. And even now, that's why I'm very close with my kids the way I am. But I just feel like if I would have had anybody, even if it would have been one of my older brothers, like who was like a father figure to me, then maybe things would have been differently, and maybe I wouldn't have ended up here in Georgia. But yeah, it was tough. It was hard. And what's even harder is that my oldest brother, who I looked up to the most, he was the one that introduced me to it at a really young age, and I looked up to him the most. But he's also the one who molested me when I was a kid, like in elementary school. So I experienced...
Your brother molested you?
Yeah.
How old were you by then?
I like 5, 6, around there is when it started. So it was before all of this, the whole, introduced me to drugs and gangs and things like that. But I experienced what I didn't know then was that, but I do know now obviously, is that I experienced my first orgasm with my brother, right? And that was tough. Yeah. Okay. So I was like 5, 6, like I was really young, really.
And
young
how old was your brother?
I mean, he was in his 20s. I mean, I don't remember for sure. I just remember it happening multiple times. Like, I remember he would sleep beside me. He would bribe me with money, like $1, $2 or whatever, Starburst. I don't know, something. It was just something ridiculous, right? And then he would just say, like, hey, if you tell anybody, then, I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to kill you. And then thankfully, one day my sister walked in and she saw that I was crying, and then she asked me, like, hey, like, what's going on? You know what I mean? But I was so scared to tell her. And so I grew up resenting him, but at the same time, he was all I had as a father figure. So the person that I hated was also the person that I was following, right? So that's how, it's just so weird. It's just so weird the way that ended up being. But yeah, it was really tough. It was really tough. And then so my mom, she wasn't there. And when I shared that with her, it's like she didn't believe me. So she's like, nah, I don't, what is she supposed to say? So it was tough.
Okay. Yeah, tough. Because then I was going to ask you, did you share this with your mom at least? Even if you never wish to share it with anybody. Yeah. Were you able to share with your mom? But then you did, but of course she did not, do you think she did not believe you, or was she in was she in denial?
I mean, I don't know. I've had conversations with her as a grown man,
Mm-hmm.
and it's still kind of like the same. And he has since passed away, you know what I
Oh,
mean? So, I was able to like forgive him, I
mm-hmm.
think. And I know we're going to talk about this, my life and like phases, and
Yeah.
that's cool. But I
Yeah.
do want to bring this up,
Mm-hmm.
that it wasn't probably maybe 5, 6 years ago. Um, I resented him a lot,
Of course.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And the older I got, the more I was like, well, why did you do that? Like, why? You know what I mean? Like no person, no man wants to say like, yeah, I experienced my first orgasm from a family member. Like that's unheard of,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so my mom was having surgery at a hospital, and I flew in to where she was living, and I thought it was just gonna be her and I, right? Well, guess who was stuck in the waiting room with me?
Your
My
brother.
oldest brother, and it
Mm-hmm.
was so awkward because it was just us two, and I just couldn't, I couldn't.
Yeah, I understand. It's okay to let it out.
Yeah, it's just I just couldn't hold it in. I just asked him like, why, and he never admitted to it. He never denied it. He just said, you know what, brother, like growing up, I did a lot of things and I regret it and I'm paying for it now. And that was it. And from that day forward, I like chose to forgive him. And it was just, it was a choice, and it was like I knew that that's something that I had to do for him. Thank you. Just for myself too, because I just had so much resentment towards him, And after that, like I felt like I had. It's not like I forgot, you don't ever forget that, but um, like I felt like I was able to have some sort of relationship with him all the way up until he died, which was right smack in the middle of COVID, and I just felt at peace too. Like I felt at peace, like
After having that
yeah,
conversation
after
with
having that
him,
conversation,
like the closure.
yeah, I felt like I had a closure, and even when he passed away, it like I said, this happened right in the middle of COVID, right? So he had a stroke on a Sunday, and he was when we were in the waiting room, he said, "Yeah, I'm suffering through through that. Like I'm suffering for it right now."
Mm.
So what he told me, I didn't understand what he meant by that because I hadn't at the time been talking to
When
him.
he had the stroke at the time?
No, no,
Or
no.
when your mom was having surgery?
Yeah, when my mom was having surgery, remember I said that we were in the
Yeah,
waiting room.
yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then he didn't admit to it. He didn't deny it,
Mm-hmm.
but he said, "You know what, brother? I've done a lot of things in my past, and I'm paying for it now." Is what he said. I didn't know what he was referencing to. Okay. So now after that, I found out that he had diabetes. He was going blind from one eye, and he had really bad kidneys. So my mom was having to help him out, right? He would go to dialysis a lot, and I'm not gonna go too much into detail about that, but I will say that there was a Sunday afternoon. I was here in Georgia. I got a phone call, and he had gotten a stroke.
Yeah.
His blood pressure had risen. The following day, he was already basically brain dead. And because of COVID, they were really strict. Like you couldn't go into the waiting, you couldn't do none of that. But luckily, the whole family was able to sit inside the room with him. And yeah, I was there. We witnessed his last breath, and I just felt so at peace, you know what I mean? Because I knew I had forgiven him, and yeah, it's just still tough to talk about, to think about, really, but it's something that I've lived by. Like I've been shown so much grace, so why can't I show that to somebody else? So yeah,
I like the fact that you said you've been shown so much grace. So why
yeah,
can't you show that to somebody else? But at the same time, I like that like you allow yourself to feel resentment because at
yeah,
that point that's what you felt. You didn't feel
yeah,
like talking to him. Like you allowed yourself to feel what we call like the negative emotions, right? And not just the positive one, like the grace. You
yeah,
allowed yourself to not like him. You
yeah,
allowed yourself to feel all of those things because sometimes I feel like through feeling resentment and not wanting to talk or not wanting to be around that person, sometimes it's only through that can we have grace towards that person.
yeah. You're right. Yeah,
So I like that you were vulnerable to yourself at least, to allow yourself to feel all those things and even
yeah,
to share this here, with
yeah.
us.
It wasn't easy though.
What I want to know, because there's a lot of and I forgave him and I told him in this. Do you think that what happened, affected you as a person, as an individual person, like in any way, like mentally, emotionally, or even in your relationship? Do you think it did? Do you think it affected you in any way, at all?
In regards to like my relationship with who?
With like anyone at all? Your
Anyone?
relationship with women, your relationship with men, or even your mental and emotional health?
Well, I think a lot of it did. I mean, that my brother did play a part in that chapter of my life, right? But there's also different variables as well. Like, could he have been a better brother? Yes. Could he have been, a father figure to me? Yes, right? But at the same time, like, I was not only getting this from my brother's side, I was also getting it from my mother's side on more of the physical abuse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Did it affect me now? Like, of course. Like, I didn't know what a relationship was. Like, I didn't know the value of like being a good student at school and then going to college. Like, I don't know what family's like. Like, I didn't know. Like, oh, that's how you celebrate birthdays. Like, family comes over. Like, oh, that's how you do Christmas and Thanksgiving. Like, families come over there. I didn't have that. I didn't have any of that. It was bad. Like, I, I don't want to say that we were poor, but we were poor, right? And I mean, my mom did the best she could with what she had, and it's just unfortunate that she had to deal with that on her own. But it did affect my relationships, and I learned, a lot, by that. But in the same way, while I did learn a lot about relationships, it also made me resent like my mom more after that, right? I think, because of what I went through at a young age, and sorry if I'm just babbling around.
No,
right?
it's okay. I mean, forget
but-
about the cameras. We're just having a chat.
No, I know. I'm not worried about the camera, but it's just I want to make sure that the point is made clear. Like, I don't want to use my mom, my brother, my childhood as an excuse to the person I became.
I like
right?
that. Like that.
That's what I don't want. I don't want to blame them for any of that.
Right.
Could it have been different? Yes. Do I wish it would have been different? Yes. But I do know that I am the father that I get like this about my kids. Sorry.
It's okay.
But I am the person who I am now. The father that I am now because of what I went through. So, in that regards, I'm just thankful for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It is a beautiful thing that you do get emotional whenever you're talking about your children and like fatherhood and everything. That shows how connected you are to your story, to your past, to every bit of it that that happened to you. That you don't just disregard it. So that's great. I do want to go back to when you moved out from the house, because you did say that you moved out from home around, is it 14, 15? But before we go to that, you made a comment that I would like for us to talk about that a little bit. You said your mother loved you in a way that she knew how to. She only did for you what she knew how to, right? Let's talk about that a little bit, because sometimes even with me, I want my father to love me in a certain way, right? It took me a long time, and it took me a lot of reading, a lot of like listening to podcasts, and just people's life stories to know that people cannot give you what they do not have, right? So maybe if your mom was not raised in a full household, right?
Yeah.
How does she know how to be, a mother in a way that you
Right.
want her to be? So if I want my father to love me in a certain way, to him, he's loving me. And I'm very sure to your mom, she was loving you, right?
Yeah.
But what if he did not experience that? So then I learned how to give myself grace with that knowledge. I learned how to give myself grace and to give my father grace that he cannot give me what he does not have.
Right.
He's loving me in the only way that he knows how to. So I like that, even though you were going through the hurt, you still, were like, she's doing her best. Even though
Yeah.
her best is not enough, but she's
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
her best.
And I think what's really important is that people become a product of their past. Right? And it's the truth. People do become a product of their past. What you don't want is to use your past as a crutch to who you are right now. Right? And I've had conversations with my mom because, everybody's the way they are for a reason. And ever since my brother passed away, like I've wondered, like, why was he like that? Like what did he go through? Right? And why wasn't he able to break the cycle? Same with my mom, like what was her childhood like? What did she see from my grandpa, right?
Yeah.
And why wasn't she able to break the cycle, And those are tough conversations to have.
Yeah.
Very tough conversations.
Some of them we will never have answers
Yeah.
to.
And that's okay. I don't want. The only thing I could focus on, like I've said, is how can I become a better father, a better leader for my kids.
Yeah.
And that's what's most important. And I haven't perfected it yet, right? I'm nowhere near that. But I do know that daily, at the end of the night, every night, I lay down and I question, what could I have done to be a better father today to my kids, and what can I do tomorrow to change that? I ask myself every single night.
Right.
So, but you were asking about what happened when I left, right?
Yes.
So,
And again, before you answer that, because you always make good points, and I never want to let those points go. Like you said, I agree with you that people become products of their past. I agree with you to a certain extent, right? Because as we are going to be journeying with you through your story, you did not become a product of your past, right? So I think that yes, it is true that people become a product of their past, but if you decide that you do not want to become a product of your past, you do have the control, you do have the power to change that. It will
Definitely.
require a lot more discipline, a lot more work, a lot more whatever, but it is possible, right?
Yeah.
Not to become a product of your past. All right, so going back to Ramiro at 14, 15, you said you moved out of the house at that point, right?
Yeah.
So what was the last straw? What was that thing that caused you to decide that I am going to move out, I am moving out? What pushed you out of the house? Where did you go after you moved out? And did you even know where you were going after you moved out?
Well, leading up to that age, I didn't have a really good relationship with my mom. Before this happened, we had a strained relationship. She was very abusive for whatever her reasonings were. And, I was more of a follower to my older brothers, right? They were already gone. Even my two older sisters were out of the house. Okay. So it was just going back and forth. We would always argue.
You and your mom?
Me and my mom. I was never at home, right? I would go out, do stupid stuff out in the streets. I was doing drugs. There are times where she would give me a time limit to come home. If I was home for 5, maybe 10 minutes late, I would have to sleep outside, things like that. And, it was hard. She would actually make me sleep in the patio, outside in the patio. And it was just a really strained relationship. And, I wasn't taking the abuse anymore. Like, I felt some type of way about her acting like that towards me, and uh, right around that age when I was in high school, she and I got into a huge argument, and I just ran away. Like, I just left the house. That's all I knew too, because everybody else had left. So I was like, well, I guess it's my turn to leave.
Right.
And so it was just my little brother and my little sister there. And I didn't hear back from my mom for years after that. In fact, she didn't even go to my graduation. I was the only one to graduate. Out of 7 of us in the family, I was the only one to graduate high school, and she didn't. She told a family member that she didn't have a reason to be there. So I had a lot of resentment towards her, a lot. But yeah, so when I left, I had no idea where I was going. In fact, I was homeless for about a week. I think it was about 4 or 5 days or whatever. Yeah, I was homeless.
Where were you sleeping?
Outside. There was people at a local restaurant who would like give me the food at the end of the night, and I would eat. But I was just out there just living in the street. And a guy that I went to high school with, who ended up being a really good friend of mine, he found out about it because, I was going to school in the same clothes. He smelled me, and he was like, what's going on? And
Were you kicking? Do you think you were kicking a little bit?
kicking.
Do you think you were smelling a little bit?
Oh, smelling.
Because you said
Sorry,
he sees you the same clothes.
No, a lot of it. So,
Okay.
yeah, he talked to his mom, and then his family brought me into their home, and I stayed with him and his family up until I graduated high school. But they really helped push me there. Like, they were firm with like everything, like a lot of stuff that I wanted, like they showed it to me, like what it was like to have a family, like discipline in a home. Yeah, I'm very, very, very grateful for them. And then after I graduated high school, obviously I had to leave. I was 18 at the time. I ended up, right before I graduated, I moved in with my sister. And
is that your older sister?
Yeah, an older sister of mine. And that's where I stayed at up until I graduated high school.
Okay, and this was still in Texas?
Yeah, this was still in Texas.
Okay.
Even when I was living with this friend of mine and my sister, I was still struggling with my identity and who I was, who I wanted to be, the things that I was surrounding myself with, right? And it was tough. Like, it was tough, and I graduated from high school. I was living with my sister. My counselors were actually helping me get into college, a college of some kind. And so they helped me do that. But at the same time, I was living so far away from the school, right? Like far, far, far away.
This was with your friend's family?
No, my friend's family was within the district.
Okay.
And then right before I turned 18, I ended up moving in with my sister.
Okay.
Right? And she lived in a different area. It was like probably 30 minutes away from the school. And while this is happening, the school has no idea that I've moved already. So I'm having to go take the bus to school.
Right.
It's a lot of stuff going on, but then they found out, and then they were helping me get into college. So again, it goes back to grace, right? Like, I was shown grace getting into my friend's, home.
Yeah.
And then after that, my sister let me stay there, and then my teachers were helping me. But at the same time, I didn't want to change. Like, I was still stuck in my old ways. So much so that I was stealing from my sister, stealing money from her, pawning her stuff to go buy drugs. And then I was doing it. Then she found out about it. And then I moved in with one of my older brothers who was living in the projects in the south side of Dallas, which, oh, by the way, was over an hour away from my school.
Wow.
And that was a really bad situation. But luckily, I graduated, and my teachers knew everything that was going on. And yeah, that was a really, really great moment in my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, you first, when you were homeless, for a couple of days. You didn't have a place to sleep. Then you moved in with your with your friend's family, and then from there you moved in with your sister.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I moved in with my sister, and then after I graduated, I was living with my brother in the projects. Right? Guess how much the rent was? Crazy.
$500.
No, it was $26 a month.
Oh.
$26 a month.
Well, I guess I wasn't born then.
No, so this was crazy, but we never ever had the money to pay for rent ever.
Wow.
We were always spending it on drugs. So any type of income that we brought, like we would buy like all kinds of drugs, right? We would fight off of, like we would literally get into fist fights to determine who would be the last person to lick the table, right? Because we were doing, you know, cocaine then. And it was really, really tough situation. And I remember one morning waking up, I was hungover, like bad. And I remember waking up and seeing people around me that I didn't even know who they were. There was like throw up on the ground, like it was just a disaster in there. And I remember going outside, sitting on the stairwell thing, right outside his apartment. And I'm like, what am I doing, like with my life? You know, like why am I here? And I remember seriously wanting to take my life. Like I wanted it to end. Like I had just broken up, or I didn't break up. She broke up with me. I had just gotten out of a relationship with the girlfriend that I had. My family was in shambles. I wasn't talking to anybody. Like my sister was pissed off at me because you know I had stole money from her. And then I was in a situation where I couldn't even pay $26 a month for rent because I was so addicted to coke. My teachers and counselors had helped me get into school, to a college, a university, right? And I didn't even go. And I was just stuck. I just felt stuck. And I just remember that day I made up my mind that I needed something different. So I called Greyhound. You've heard of Greyhound, right? The Greyhound buses. And I talked to the person and I was like, hey, do y'all have any specials anywhere to the U.S., in the U.S.? And they said they had a one-way ticket special to Atlanta. And I remember I packed up the little clothes that I had or whatever.
How old were you by then?
18. And I woke up my brother. I was like, hey, go drop me off at the bus station. And I came to Atlanta. And I knew nobody here at all. So I got here, and obviously people, my family are like, you're stupid. Like, why are you doing that? You don't know anybody there. And frankly, I did feel stupid because I knew nobody here. And I just had enough money for a hotel stay and maybe to get something to eat. But after that, I was done.
Do you remember exactly how much you had?
No, I mean,
okay.
No, I don't. But it was enough to get a hotel. So check this out. So I need you to listen to the details here, right? Because this is so important. So I get to Atlanta, and like, I'm an 18-year-old little scrawny kid, right? I mean, I'm still pretty scrawny. But like, I was tiny, 18 years old. I'm carrying these bags of clothes. I'm like downtown Atlanta. I had no idea what I'm doing. And a homeless guy comes up to me. And he's like, hey, son, you look lost. I remember that. It scared the hell out of me. And I was like, well, yeah, I am lost. And he's like, what are you trying to look for? I was like, I remember telling him, I was like, I'm just trying to find a hotel to stay at. And he's like, well, you're not going to find any around here. How old are you? And I was like, I'm 18. He's like, well, you got to be, I think you have to be like 21 or something to get a hotel or something. And so I asked him, I was like, well, where can I go? And he's like, come on, I'll help you. And he's like, let's get on the bus. And he gave me, a homeless guy, gave me his bus ticket, okay? And I got on the bus, and the bus took me to, for those that live in Atlanta, to off of I-20 and Wesley Chapel. Are you familiar with that area? Probably not. Okay. Well, right over there was a Motel 6. He walked me all the way up there, and he didn't ask for nothing. This was a homeless guy. He didn't ask for nothing. He dropped me off there, and he's like, all right, this is it. You need help with anything else? No. And then there was like a Wendy's next door. right? And I didn't even have enough to give him for that because it's either he eats or I eat, all right? And I was definitely gonna eat. Obviously, I feel bad about it now, but I'm just saying I just had enough for myself, and so I stayed there at that Motel 6 that night, and then I went and ate, and then I came back.
Okay,
right?
so wait, he gave you his bus ticket. How did he get on the bus with you?
I don't have no idea. I just remember he handed me a bus ticket, and that was it. I think that's the only time I've been on MARTA since I've lived here, and I got here in 2000. So I don't think I've been on a MARTA bus since.
But he was still on the bus.
Yeah, he was on the bus with me.
Okay.
So I was after I got done with eating at Wendy's. I remember going into my room, and I was just overwhelmed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I had no idea what was going to happen the next day. Family members are like, come back, we'll pay for your way back, just come back home, you know? And I just knew that I was better than the situation that I was in.
Yeah.
And the only way that I can show that is if I separated myself from everybody. So I was overwhelmed. I remember after I got off the phone with my sisters and my brothers who were telling me to come back, I just got on my knees. And I was going to church then, right? I wasn't really involved. I was going to church more so because my girlfriend at the time was going, you know what I mean? But I remember I got on my knees that night and I like yelled and I was crying. I was like, God, I don't know why I'm here or what I'm doing here or what's going to happen tomorrow, but please just provide a way. And I was on my knees on the floor, right, at this Motel 6, and I said that. And yeah, that was the end of it for that night. I called the hotel receptionist and I was like, hey, could you like please set an alarm to give me a call early in the morning because I wanted to get up early so that I knew what I was gonna do. So the next morning came and I woke up and I was scared, right? And I remember asking the the receptionist for like a white book, the yellow pages. And so I'm going through the yellow pages and I'm looking for churches that have like shelters or whatever. And all the churches, like the big advertisement, you know, churches would either keep me on hold or hang up on me. This is not a lie. Like it was just so crazy. And checkout was like 11 o'clock, right, at the hotel. And I remember the last church that I called, no lie, it was the smallest print, the smallest one, right? So remember, homeless guy and the smallest print.
Yeah.
And I called that. It was in Ellenwood, and a pastor answered. His name is Mike, Pastor Mike. And I told him my story. He's like, yeah, I'm going to come by and pick you up. He's like, I'll be there in an hour. And sure enough, he pulled up. Him and his friend. He took me to a shelter, right? And at this church, like they had like, you know, bedding for people who were like homeless. And what they would do is they would help them get on their feet so that they could move on.
Right.
Like help them get an apartment, job, things like that, right? So he took me to this church. The pastor there, he interviewed me. He's like, so why are you coming from Texas? Like, did you go to church there? I said, yes. He called the pastor at the church that I was going at in Texas. They talked. And so they felt comfortable. They're like, all right, well, you can stay here. But if you stay here, these are the rules that you're going to have to follow. Got it. Cool. I'm like, thank you, Jesus. I'm not going to be homeless, right? Well, Pastor Mike, this was a Wednesday. He used to be an evangelist. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So he used to travel the whole nation, right? Even overseas to like preach, right? And so he had just gotten this church in Ellenwood. So he was like, hey, I'm going to bring him back home with me to church. And then after the service, I'll bring him back. And so the guy was like, cool, that's cool. So I went and sat in Pastor Mike and listened to his service. Ended up being late in the evening when it was over. But he had a trailer out there, right? And he's like, hey, you could sleep in there. There's like water going to it, whatever. Just take a bath. And then in the morning, I'll wake you up or you'll be awake and then I'll take you to the shelter. Cool. Woke up the next morning, took a shower, made me some, I think I ate like cereal or something, whatever was in there, and I waited, right? 10 o'clock, 11, noon came, nobody had come to the door. It wasn't until probably about 5, 6 o'clock that afternoon, late afternoon, I hear somebody knocking on the trailer door. I was like, what? Why is he knocking on his own trailer, right? So I opened it up, and Pastor Mike was in tears. And so I was like, what's going on? You know what I mean? And he looked at me, he's like, hey, my wife and I have been talking, and we've decided that we're not going to take you back to the shelter, but we want you to stay in this trailer with us. And not only that, my wife has this 1988 Beretta, which was, by the way, a really cool car. Mm-hmm. But she wasn't driving it. She's like, you can have the car. Wow. And there's a member at our church who owns a business, and he wants you to work for him. So in a matter of 24 hours, right? Like, I went from having nothing, literally just buying a ticket. If they would have said, yeah, we have a one-way ticket to South Dakota, I would have been in South Dakota. But they just said Atlanta. And I went from having nothing to having everything, I felt like, and a place to stay. But, you know what they say, it doesn't matter how far away you are from the problem. If you don't fix your heart, you're always going to go back to where you are. So remember, I was telling you how I was a homeless guy, and then it was a little small print, right? So that's really stuck out with me, especially now, because it made me realize that you don't have to have the biggest stature as a person to make a difference. And you don't have to be like this glamorous thing in the yellow pages where it's all big to make a difference.
Or sometimes you think, oh, help is going to come from,
yeah,
you know, this place, because it looks like where help should come from.
But it doesn't. It comes from like the smallest, not to say that they're the smallest people, from like
places you don't expect.
But yeah, places you don't expect. And so that's the type of person I want to be. You know what I mean? That's the type of person. I feel like that helped me out a lot. Especially like let's go back to before I got here, right? Like, I've been saying the word grace a lot, but let's talk about like the family that helped me get into their home. Like, imagine the impact that has on me right now, right? Giving, like like how that shaped me to be the man that I am. And then let's fast forward to when I got here. Strangers, complete strangers, pick me up from a hotel, right? And then allow me to stay in their home. A married couple, which, oh, by the way, she was pregnant too, right? And then like the homeless guy, and then it's just amazing. So that's the point. That's why I was pointing that out. It's like, hey, you don't have to be like this big time celebrity to make a difference. You know, that's true. You can still make a difference in your now. That's what you want us to see from that. So I'm just going to take you back a little bit. Your sister, you did mention about the relationship between your sister and you, right? What is that relationship now? What does it look like right now? You know, are you back? You know, do you guys have a relationship at all? So I was actually closest to her out of all my sisters. She's the one who actually taught me how to write, how to tie my shoes. When she left the house when I was a kid, like, I cried because I was so close to her. So she was obviously really hurt for a period of time, and it wasn't until after I moved to Georgia where we started to, you know, mend our relationship. And now we talk about it, and, you know, we joke about it, we laugh about it. But at the time, she was really, really, really pissed off. Yeah, really pissed off. So we're in a really good place now. Really good place. Okay. Thankfully.
And the relationship with the family that, you know, brought you in, Pastor Mike and the family, are you still in contact with them? Where are they now?
Well, yeah, well, even before Pastor Mike, let's talk about the family that helped me when I was in high school. Yeah. So, no, I don't talk to them very much, and the reason why is because I also stole from them. That was the reasoning why I moved out of there. They had, because originally they wanted me to stay there until I graduated, And then, yeah, it's just, but no, like I still, like I'm friends with them on social media, and then we'll, send each other pictures like, hey, you remember this? But it's like nothing like that. And honestly, I would like to go back when I do go back to Texas and go visit my friend's mom and dad, just to be able to talk to them.
Yeah.
Because they knew that I was stealing from them, but every time they would ask me, like, I would always deny it. Like, I remember one time they found the checkbook underneath my pillow, and they were like, Ramiro, are you stealing from us? And I'm like, no, I don't know how it got there. I know. It was bad. But I do want to go back and just clear that up with them and thank them for what they did and apologize.
When you talk about drugs and everything, I'm assuming that if you and your brother were fighting about who was going to be the last person to, lick the table, so you were somehow addicted to it, what was the process of you becoming sober, or just, just say, I'm done with cocaine, I'm done with drugs? What was that process? What did it look like?
How can I say the process was? So, yes, I was addicted, right? I think me moving to Georgia kind of like stopped me from doing it momentarily. But like I said, it doesn't matter how far away you are from an issue. If your heart isn't cleansed from that, you're always going to go back, because that's all you know. So I went back, and ultimately the thing that really stopped me from going where I was going with drugs was prison.
Friend, thank you so much for joining me here today and sharing your story, not just with me, but with people out there, and letting them hear it as well. Thank you for saying yes to me, friend.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to part 1 of Ramiro's story. I hope it resonated with you the same way it resonated with me. Don't forget to tune in next week to part 2, where he will be talking to us about his life in incarceration. This is The Chat with Selassie. Have a fantastic week. Mwah.